Okay, so I figured I would finally make um, an entry um, to Ecodiesel tuning. Like this is tips and tricks for those of you who are doing the Ecodiesel tuning on your own, and things that I've learned over the years or the past or whatever to help make your life a little bit easier. So the first step is anything that needs to be done in the background to remove specific heavy items off your vehicle um, in order to do the stage 2 tuning needs to be done in the file first, which I'm not going to show you how to do because it's not in hptuners, it's behind the scenes. So um, honestly, let me click here once, okay? So this is what the user defined parameters looks like. Now, with that being said, um, the titles of these are going to be very confusing for those of you at home because I have titled them in most of these in what number I should make this map. Rather than having the map with the name on it, I literally just have the map, hey, make 0, make this, and I have everything in the background, and none of this stuff you can access in HP Tuners. So um, I mean, you can if you have user-defined parameters, but you need to make this background parameter yourself. And if you're interested in having this stuff done to your file, it is cheaper and a hell of a lot less of a headache to just pay me to do this section for you rather than um, go through and learn all this yourself from scratch. Okay. Now, simple basics. Okay. Um, idle. Okay, you have what we're looking at here is the factory numbers. What I have open is I have a tune open, and then I have the factory settings as a compare behind it. Okay, so I go through and I modify things based on my own personal preferences. So when it comes to idles, coal adders, and stuff like that, this is all up to you. There's nothing that I can tell you here that's going to make life easier. One thing I can tell you though is to um, make sure that personally I leave the last row stock so that way you don't have to worry about the idle being super high or anything when you put it in a gear or anything else. If you have this table set high, it doesn't matter how hot the engine gets, this is the RPM that it's going to stay at. So keep that in mind. Um, Mass airflow is here, something that you're not really going to mess with as entry level tuning at all. Fuel, you have allowed torque based on system error. You have overspeed threshold. That's just the RPM that it detects that the engine is going too fast. And then you have maximum RPM based on looks like engine coolant temperature and gearing. Okay. Here is going to be um, a little bit of what you do now. This is going to be a little bit different to explain because there isn't really a good quality um, number to tell you what to do here. So what I can tell you here, now this is the stock pulse width. Now, as you can see here, there is an area that's red and an area that's blue. Now, the area that's red is the area where I have actually modified the pulse width table and turned it down because there wasn't as high of a pulse width needed in those areas because there's no more DPF. Now, up here is where the higher is. Now, you're rarely ever going to have this fuel rail pressure and this volume. yeah, this is really never going to happen, okay? So you can kind of ignore this section here and you modify, give or take this section here. Now, driving down the highway, you're going to be kind of in this area here. So a lot of this stuff I typically like to leave stock in the lower area, and then just a hair above highway threshold is when I start to modify the pulse width table. Now, there's really not much I can tell you here as a good tip and trick on what you want to do um, for changing pulse width, but the thing that you do need to remember is that this is what the table looks like from the factory. So the table should maintain a similar structure to this. Now that is something you want to keep in mind when you're modifying these tables. Now this table here. Okay, so typically the easiest thing for you to do is to add anywhere from 5 to 20 to 30% here on the top and grab somewhere down here in the middle and use this button here to basically make changes to adjust it, because this is typically what this table looks like. Now it's not very smooth, so again, what you probably want to do to start off with is you want to take, let's just take something simple, okay? Let's take and times this by 2.5%, and then I can't because this is the stock one, so I can't use these buttons here. Okay, but typically you can't even change it. That was just a stupid thing on my part, okay? Let's see if it's, oh yeah, okay. But on a table like this, when you want to smooth it, you can basically times it by a small percentage and then smooth it out a little bit. That way you're not causing dips to go lower than the factory settings. The torque-based fuel, again, is going to be something where more than likely you're going to take the top half of the torque table, you're going to times this by a set percentage, you're going to slope this back down. Again, there's not really anything I can tell you about how exactly you need to do something like that. Okay. Um, Diesel timing. This be a little bit more tips and tricks here for you. Okay. Um, so typically for me, anything under 1,000 RPMs all the way up, I try to leave as the exact factory table. Okay, because this is the area where the truck idles. This is the area where the truck starts. This is an area that the truck has pretty much been pre-programmed for, that shouldn't really need any modifications. So what I like to do is I like to make a perfect timing table from right around here to here, and then paste it into all of these, and then reshape it from here down. Okay. Um, That allows the areas where the truck idles and the low RPM areas to stay stock, and then feather into the timing table that I like for driving and wide open throttle. But by, pasting it in an area up here and then feathering it down allows me to um, keep some areas stock and then move over into uh, a tuned area. So this here is one table, and this might look a little bit confusing to people because you do see some hard ridges, okay? But there's reasons for this, and I'll explain to you why. If you notice the RPM change, I don't spin these motors over 3,500 RPMs, okay? So anything over 3,500 RPMs, I cut everything. I cut fuel, I cut timing, I cut boost. That's why you get this hard ridge here where the timing is significantly reduced, because I don't want anything on this engine to make any power over 3,500. I want it all gone. So anytime you see my tables, you're going to see something like this where it completely starts pulling timing or whatever else, okay? Now here's something else to note. These do not make more than 23 degrees of timing advance on the main table. Even if you were to hit this exact cell, which says 28.6, it's not going to go above 23, okay? It just doesn't. It requires significantly more changes in the tune that you're not going to have the ability to do in here at all to hit that, okay? So any number over 23 is going to be ignored. It's going to hit 23 or 22 right around there, and that's where it's going to stop. So don't look at tables like this and just get super scared because first off, it can, if you wanted to run 30 degrees of timing, it'll take it all day. Second off, this is not a gasoline engine. These things are not the same in that aspect, okay? Let's pick another random timing table and kind of look at it. These are all kind of the same. I'm trying to find one that's not all super negative. Oh, so with that being said, positive numbers are before top dead center, negative numbers are after top dead center, okay? Now what you can see here is that I actually, on a lot of these, I take this L shape and I maintain this L from the factory table, okay? And you can see how where the tune was, and then you can see how it sloped in. Okay, so let's take this here. This is factory. This is mine. You can see from the factory, I got this weird hump here. Okay. Now these jumps are they're not great, but they're not bad. So what we run into is a lot of these tables don't have enough room um, to fully um, I'm trying to think of the word. I don't want to use the word variate because I don't think that's a word, but variate make we don't have enough cells to make an extremely high variation between let's say 17 degrees here and 4 degrees here where we can't make a smooth transition. So for an example, let's just take this once and take a look here. I don't know if it stayed selected. Let's see if it did. Okay, so we can smooth it out. Okay, so this is it smoothed out. Okay, but if you look here, by smoothing it out, what we did was we end up increasing timing in areas like this and then decreasing timing in areas where um, they might have been more useful for us. Now you can do this either way. Um, I prefer to have it be more like this. And don't get me wrong, you can come in and you could do make changes um, like this, go through and remake a few changes in order to give it a slight um, curvature to it. Because I mean, you could go, don't get me wrong, you could do this. Okay, let's I'm trying to think of where that was. Let's here, let's select from here to here. Okay, and that's right in this section here. I mean, and you can do, I mean, you can make this side by side and see what you're doing as well. Um, But this isn't bad, okay? So when you want to consider something like this, like a graph, bad, it's when you have these massive spikes, okay? Like something like this. Shit like this. This is the type of shit you don't want to see, or the type of stuff you don't want to see, okay? This right here is bad. You don't want to see that. These humps, things like that, yeah, you can soften them up a little bit. You can there's I mean there's no reason why you can't, okay? So fine. See, it's a little bit more soft, okay? And what do we got here? We got from here to here. Okay, so so you can soften the stuff up, okay? You absolutely can. This is up to you. Um, but again, it just there's certain things I don't want my timing to do, so I don't always smooth everything out because it isn't always the right thing to do. Yes, it might look okay, but it might not always be what you want to do. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that when you look at tables like this, you're never going to be making 74 foot-pounds of torque and be doing 3,100 RPMs, okay? Your line is typically always going to go from here and cross through here, okay? So keep that in mind. So if you're going to make anything smooth, try to take an area like this and smoothen the ramp transition here. See how the red increased right there? Okay, so you get a nice transition through here, okay? So just keep that in mind. That's all I'm going to say right there for the timing. Um, Post events, you go through all the post events if this vehicle is fully removed and just remove all the post timing. You want all the post timing set to 0 all the way across the board. Set anything to do with post timing 0, okay? Now, if you run too much ignition timing, or not ignition, or fuel timing, initial fuel timing, you will get what we call ignition rattle or diesel rattle, okay? And that is where when you initially blip the throttle, you get the old rattle like 7.3 power stroke. Now, anytime, so your timing is three things, okay? You have your pilot timing, your main timing, and your post timing, okay? Well, your main and your pilot make up a single digit timing number, okay? So let's say that number is 60 degrees. And let's say your pilot is 40 and your main is 20. Well, if you change your main to 30, your pilot doesn't change, okay? Which means your pilot comes on even sooner, okay? Um, and that will make the rattle even stronger. So one of the things that you want to do is as you increase main timing, you're going to want to reduce pilot timing. But the pilot timing you want to reduce in very small changes. You know, take 5% away from the quantity, take 5% away from, you know, see like this specifically, this was a super simple change. Any type of rattle that does happen happens in the center section. Okay, so what we did was we just reduced the center section and kind of left all the other sections alone. Um, what somebody else can do is come in and select the whole table and take away 2%. Pilot timing, you're going to have to do a lot of research on your own and decide how you want to adjust the pilot timing based on how the vehicle drives. Okay, so torque. So if you can, go ahead and leave all of this alone. Leave the monitoring alone. Um, the max enable. Um, you can see I pump it up to 750 and then I pull power right away. Okay, you can see the RPMs are different. This section's on you. Okay, same with the monitoring. This is on you how you want to change it. Um, I'm not going to give you any tips on this. This is more or less something that you need to make decision, look up what each one does and make a decision on your own with what you want to do there, okay? Driver demand. Again, notice the RPMs, see how they change. So what I do is I increase driver demand, okay? So this, we increase driver demand up to 600 foot-pounds of torque, okay? We feather it down, but instead of running this table all the way across like we used to, we immediately, as soon as it hits 3200, it starts pulling, 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 pulling until eventually 3600, no pulling. Now, what a guy can do if a guy really wants to make this more long, drawn out thing, a guy can take this 2800 and put it like here, and then go from 2800 to 3400 here and create a nice line down because obviously here you're going to get a, so you got this slope, you know, it just power falls, crashes off, okay? It is what it is. um, it works great, we don't have any issues with it, so we haven't seen a reason to take away from this, okay? Turbocharger, this is the best thing I can tell you with the turbocharger. Leave modes 3 and 7 completely stock on these. Okay, you can see that on mine I did make a few small modifications to certain areas on this specific tune, but for you, I highly recommend you take modes 3 and 7 and leave them stock. And honestly, on most of these, I would leave this high altitude stock, okay? So you could take a table. So let's see this table, okay? Now, look, this is what the factory one looks like. This is the table we did on this one. Notice how we have 14.5 right here. This is ambient air pressure, meaning we're targeting zero boost over 3,500 RPMs. Again, completely cutting power over 3,500. We don't want this engine to spin over 3,500 for any reason, and if it does spin over 3,500, we want it to free spin. So when I do it, we completely pull power. Another thing to note is I never run over 42. Okay, now on the Gen 3s, you'll see that, see my 42 is higher than stock right here, right? Okay, so let me put it this way. These map sensors can read, I believe it is 43.6 psi, which is ambient air pressure plus boost. So we set the limit to 42 psi because once it passes the limit, which is the 43.6 psi of ambient pressure plus boost, the sensor can no longer read it, which means it can no longer really accurately control the boost. So that's why we lower this to 42, okay? Because if we were to pull typical ambient air pressure out, this is what the target boost looks like. This is the boost you're targeting. So driving down the highway typically is right here and typically is right here. Okay, so on this specific vehicle, we're targeting as much as 12 psi driving on the highway. And in some instances, people might think, oh shit, 12 psi is a lot. In this small of a turbo, it is really not. Here's the thing about diesel engines is that unlike a gasoline engine, you can throw more boost at a diesel engine without actually adding more fuel. So by adding more boost, you're able to add a little bit more power. You're able to lean the engine out, which produces less NOx emissions, and you get better fuel economy. So just something to note there that you want more boost while cruising. Now you don't want so much boost as in the boost is physically pulling the vehicle down the road, but you want just enough boost so that the vehicle is using as little effort to maintain the speed as possible. So like I said, 3, 7, leave those stock, okay? Let's pick a random whatever. So here we have a variable vane table, okay? Now, same instance there, see the RPMs. Notice right at the top there, the turbo vanes are set to 0, meaning it doesn't want to make any boost. So right as we come up to the point of 3,500 RPMs to the shift, we start pulling boost, we start pulling everything, and we let it go. Okay, you can see that we basically didn't make a lot of changes to the table. There's not a lot of changes that are needed to the table. Honestly, I have made some changes. Um, so this isn't the most recent tune, okay? So I have made some changes um, since then, okay? And the changes I've made since then where I would take something like this and let's do this. Now recently, I go through and I make it more like this. So what I do is you have 95% here in the top cell, okay? This is so when you completely let off the gas pedal and you are slowing down, the minute that your injection quantity falls to the lowest amount, the vanes will close. Okay, but you're not giving it any gas, so it's going to slow the vehicle down. This is what you would be considered your exhaust brake, okay? Now what we have here is we have this 0 here. This is an idle area. When the truck high idles, it'll idle in this area, okay? This area has high vanes, it produces that slight whistle sound and helps the truck warm up when it's cold. But once the idle drops to 800 or below, we have this zero vane position. Now, what zero vane position does is it opens the vanes all the way up. The turbo makes absolutely no boost at idle, and you get more of the Cummins rumble sound. Um, a lot of customers like the way that this sounds. Um, it's just, and it's a personal preference for me. Now, again, I highly recommend that people do not just copy the numbers they see here in these videos because when you tune, that's definitely not what you should do. Okay, so do please keep that in mind. In all of these tables, I I make the same changes to each table, but I leave the table system stock. I don't copy and paste the table over each one of these, okay? So just keep that in mind. But again, mode 3 and mode 7, I leave alone. You have your upper boost control deviation. Me personally, I would set this to at least 15. And lower, I would set this to at least negative 15 or more. But I would change it to PSI. I don't even know what I have it set to. So that one's set to 58. Okay, so it's, I think, God, what are these? So this is what the stock table looks like, okay? So me personally, like I said, I would come in here. They don't need to be this high. This was a test that we were doing on a vehicle with a modified turbo. But the boost deviation, uh, I would come in and I would just set negative 15 one way, negative 15 or positive 15 the other way while you're tuning, okay? And once you get it the way you like it, come back in and make these stock and see if you set any check engine lights because of it and things like that. Because turbos will have deviation, as in one turbo might be older, one turbo might be newer, you know, pipes might be flexing. There's all kinds of things that cause the boost to deviate. So you want to find a number of allowed deviation. Now, I've seen a truck throw a P0299 under boost code while making 30 plus PSI. It was because the turbo was increasing vane position in order to hold boost pressure exactly where a factory wanted it to be, but it still triggered a underboost code because technically it was still leaking boost out even though it was adapting for it. These vehicles are very finicky and they're very difficult to tune for a lot of power. It's very simple for somebody to just open up this file and just throw freaking stuff at it and go, oh, here we go, it runs good, here's freaking 20 horsepower. There's a reason why we're the only company that puts out 70 plus horsepower tuning for these, is because we spend an ass load of time actually going through and figuring things out, okay? Now, I don't know if engine diagnostics is going to show up. Oh yeah, duh. So I did not go through and set any of these check engine lights, okay? So I have certain check engine lights that are shut off in the tune that automatically come through and shut off, okay? Now, the difference is so let's pick a bunch of these. See all of these are related to the stage 2 tune. But if you just come through and disable it here in the tune, it only disables the light. It doesn't disable the ability for that to set in the background. So you have to go through and shut it off in the background, which you cannot do in here without the user defined parameters. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Fuel system, tons of fuel rail pressure stuff here, okay? Um, and it's all, these are all stock right now, but this is all in PSI. You know, the CP4 can put out 30 PSI, whatever. Um, fuel rail pressure, fuel yeah, fuel rail pressure. Modifying changes and settings to fuel rail pressure, you definitely shouldn't do if you're a beginner. Um, there are some things that are a little bit stupid from the factory, like this right here. Look, like this. This is dumb. You know what I mean? This is a factory table. Hold on. I mean, this just looks awful, right? So, but you can't just come in here and play with this if you don't know what you're doing. So again, that's a video for another day. There's nothing you can do for fans in HP tuners. You can modify the speed. You can do a lot of diagnostics for the transmission. One of the things that you should always do is disable P219. Scroll down here, disable P215C, and then disable 0100. Okay, 0100 will pop anytime you tune these, and it gets annoying, which is why we disable it. Okay, P215C and P219 we disable because anytime you spin the tires, do a burnout, gravel, snow, whatever, those two codes screw with the transmission and can put it in a limp mode. Transmission, I'm not going to show you transmission changes, but one thing I'm going to tell you absolutely is do not screw with this number right here. If you screw with this number here, you need to disable U0403, which doesn't always disable. So here it is right here. You disable it here. But again, just because you disable it here in hptuners doesn't mean that all three locations, yep, all three locations in the computer are fully disabled as well. So keep that in mind. Just because you can shut a code off in here doesn't mean it actually shuts it off in the computer 100%. I think that's all I'm going to show you guys for today. Again, if you have any questions on... Oh yeah, and so another thing to keep in mind here is you want to set your max here to whatever your max is in there. And as for minimum, I always set the minimum to some absolutely negative number that I'm never going to hit. Um, Please comment down here if you have any questions about Ecodiesel tuning or changes, and if I can make a video for it, I absolutely will. Um, just kind of to help people out who are trying to tune their own truck at home. And like I've said to people in the past too, is that we're more than willing to sell you a file to use that you can tune yourself. So just reach out, like I said, if you have any questions.